John Stroud, Stroud, and I'm the editor of the Glenwood Springs Post Independent.
And you've been here since like the 80s?
Yeah, I've been a reporter on and off over the years, about 30 years, since the late 80s.
The role that the Post Independent played in covering Bundy was pretty significant.
Yeah, and at that time it was known as the Glenwood Post. And yeah, we covered those, the escape from the Garfield County Jail and the Pickens County Courthouse before that. And I wasn't here at the time, but it was still big news when I arrived about 10 years later.
And I mean, you know, to have that documented, and especially, you know, in the mountains, there probably weren't like TV stations up here, so you were really the only kind of record on that.
Yeah, you know, us and a couple of other daily newspapers on the western slope and in Aspen were the only ones around at that time.
And how significant is it to have that record and to have that coverage and to know your paper was part of that?
Yeah, you know, it's a little slice of history here in Garfield County and Pickens County that, you know, it's not exactly attractive history, but, you know, 30 or 40 years later, it's a big deal still.
Are you surprised that with the Netflix and just everyone talking about it again?
Yeah, I'm not really surprised. I mean, this the Bundy case has always been one of those that has just been in people's you know, imaginations and what the I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
That it just catches people's attention, and all these years later, it's amazing.
Yeah, and I know you haven't watched are you planning to watch the series?
I would like to, yes. I have not done so yet, but I plan to do that.
I know, just looking back at some of your articles and some of the articles from around here at the time, it sounds like there was a little bit of a frenzy and maybe fear, you know, with him escaping, with just everything going on.
Yeah, certainly. And again, I wasn't here directly, so I don't have any direct knowledge of it. But yeah, I can only imagine what was going through people's minds. Here's this potentially crazy killer out there running loose in the hills, and who knows if he's still here or if he's left the area. You know, there was warnings all over the place not to pick up hitchhikers because you don't know who it might be, and you know, not leave your keys in the car, because he was known to steal cars to get away after he made these escapes.
And especially in a community such as this, and in Aspen, it's not like there was probably a lot of crime, and people probably felt pretty safe.
Yeah, I would think so. You know, it probably was a big eye-opener to people at the time, because we were considered a pretty safe community, and all of a sudden here was this potential killer on the loose.
And so take me back to kind of like I guess the rediscovery of these photos. You had a safe that you had brought over.
Yes, so we had a safe that it's you know, probably 100 years old, and it had been with the Glenwood Post in at least 3 different locations here in downtown Glenwood Springs and various locations around Glenwood, and had been in use, and we moved into this building, this location, in 2011, and it came with us, but the combination had been lost at some point over time with staff changes, and so no one knew what was in it and really hadn't given it a whole lot of thought until a local locksmith by the name of Wayne Winton came in and noticed the safe and told us that, hey, I can crack that safe for you if you'd like to see what's in there. And we had no idea what was in there. It was this big discovery. We documented it ourselves for a story, just to see you know, what turned up in the old safe. And lo and behold, there was this envelope with some negatives, black and white negatives, and contact sheets. And among those were the photos of Ted Bundy in Pickens County before and after his escape there. And it was just this little, like I said, a little slice of history that we happened onto here in Garfield County and Pickens County. And freelance photographer by the name of Ross Dolan took these. And it's interesting, you know, amidst the Ted Bundy photos are just some, you know, the local high school, the golf course pro shop, some 4-H photos and things like that. So it's just, it's an interesting little find.
And
Can you turn the monitor back on?
Oh, yes. Got to password it.
What's on?
Turned off right at the beginning of that.
Do you want him to start over
I don't
again?
know. I didn't want to cut you off because it was flowing, but it's up to you.
Okay. And so with the safe, you had no idea what was in there, right?
We had no idea what was in there. I mean, we assumed it was probably just some paperwork and business-related documents, and there were some invoices and receipts and an envelope with a $20 bill that was kind of, you know, who knows where that came from, and things like that. And but, you know, this was the gem that was found in there.
And was there, you know, anticipation, intrigue about what may be in the safe? And
well, you know, we just had no idea. There could have been a big monetary find or something like that, and you just never know when you have an old safe like that that hasn't been accessed for many years. And you know, with the staff changeover, there probably someone at one point did have some recollection of what was in there, but the photographer that we had back in the 1990s, who I still keep in touch with, he was the one that decided the safe would be a good place to keep these and make sure they didn't get lost. And it was a good decision at that time.
I was going to say, you're probably glad, right?
Yes.
What did
Can
you
real quick put the two photos back up on the screen just for continuity, since if we cut between bites? Perfect. Thank you.
And so when that safe was finally opened and you saw these, what was your reaction?
Well, just wow. I kind of one of those remember when moments. Even though I wasn't here then, I remembered the stories from when I first started here as a young reporter about Ted Bundy and his time here, and all the buzz around that. And I arrived here just about a year before he was put to death in Florida, and of course there was lots of stories at that time too about remembering that time. And it's finally justice was finally served in a lot of people's minds when that happened. And yeah.
And I know, I mean, especially to have, you know, not just have any photos of him, but it seems like the photo that was captured here is one of the more sinister ones.
It is. It's that iconic grin that he would flash in the courtroom, and you can just see the charm that everyone talks about with him, and an evil charm, I guess. It's is he smiling? Is he grinning? Is I'm going to get away with this? Who knows what's going through his mind at that point in time?
Yeah, what do you see when you look at these pictures?
You know, for me, I just see the story lives on today still, obviously, and it was just a piece of history here.
And to know that you're the keeper of such important photos, and to know that thankfully they weren't lost.
Yeah, just glad they weren't lost. You know, it's always fun to find these little tidbits of history that are still in your possession and preserved after all these years.
Okay, and some of the other photos, it's just not only the ones in court here, but kind of showing that manhunt and really painting a picture of what was happening at the time. Exactly,
yeah. I just, like I say, I can't imagine what was going through people's minds, and the stories still come out of the woodwork today. Oh, here I remember where I was when that happened.
Or people, I know I've seen people saying, I remember when they stopped my car.
Exactly, yeah, checkpoints. And, you know, I heard stories that through some of the vehicle searches, they made drug busts.
Because they're stopping everybody.
Yeah, because they're stopping everybody and finding all sorts of things unrelated to Bundy, but it just happened that way.
And I would imagine, because it seemed like on all sides of town and people couldn't get anywhere, and what that was like at the time.
Exactly, yeah. And yeah, you know, traffic wasn't like it is now in those days, but still you had to get, there was only one bridge across the river in Glenwood Springs, and you had to get somewhere, and it made it difficult.
I know one of the questions that, you know, I don't think it can ever be answered, but I mean, he escaped here could this story have ended in Colorado?
Well, I mean, that's certainly a lot of the speculation is, you know, had he stayed in the Garfield County Jail and gone to trial here for the murder in Snowmass, then yeah, he probably wouldn't have made his way to Florida and killed more people there.
And I mean, I kind of wonder too. I know we have the death penalty as well, but would he still be locked up? Would he be alive? Would Colorado have put him to death?
It would have been a different story.
You think so?
Yeah. Well, I mean, any change in the circumstances, you just never know what would have transpired from that point forward if one little thing had changed.
Yeah, I don't know. I know that's kind of one of the questions. Is like, oh, he got away in Colorado, and then he went on to kill more people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it was, you know, it was the beginning of some changes with the jail here in Garfield County too, because that jail continued to exist for another dozen or so years. But it was operated under a federal court decree because a lawsuit had been filed over the overcrowding conditions in the jail, and so a federal court decree was handed down that governed how many people they could keep in the jail, and so for many, many years they were farming jail inmates out to other counties because they didn't have enough space in the jail here, and it was about a dozen years later a new jail was built.
Is there anything that you think people should know about kind of the Colorado connections to this story?
You know, why did he pick Colorado? How did he end up here? And you know, you never know. Maybe he felt like this he could get away with it here. It was a place to hide, and but yeah, you know, how things could have changed if he'd gone someplace else, and we wouldn't have this story in our backyard.
Yeah.
And I do need to correct myself. It was more than a dozen years when the new jail was built.
Oh,
it would have been,
no worries.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah, it was more like 20 years, I think. Yeah.
I'm trying to think what else. I just know, you know, one of the things is there's been so much focus on him, and the fact is there are 3 victims in Colorado as well, and for rightfully so, their families haven't really been that outspoken, but they probably deserve some attention too.
Yes, and you know, every time this story comes back around, you always want to remember the victims and their families and the difficult time that they went through when this all transpired. And you know, you hear that now with the you know, the movie theater shooting in Denver, and you know, don't focus just on the perpetrator, but remember the victims.
Okay. I don't know. Do you have anything else?
Not really, no.
Okay. I'm guessing, I mean, there's people now that, you know, they're watching the Netflix series. Maybe they weren't alive when this happened. And
well, yeah, and again, it's, you know, for anyone younger, certainly it's a piece of history that they didn't witness firsthand.
And they might not know.
Might not know, yeah, what exactly went down all those years ago, and how things were different. You know, if how would a serial killer be handled today compared to 40 years ago?
And just also might not realize that Colorado's, I guess, significant role in all of this.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Some miscellaneous documents, safe deposit box key that had long since been relinquished. No pot of gold, but did have some cash. There was an envelope addressed to the Glenwood Post with a handwritten message. Came in the mail this way with a $20 bill and no other explanation of what it was for. So the PI gave the $20 to Winton, the locksmith, for lunch money in exchange for his hard work for retrieving some fascinating views into history.
Kind of describe them. What do you see here?
Well, you know, you wouldn't see this this kind of lax security in a situation like that today. I mean, things are so much more secure. In fact, a lot of times the inmates don't even walk through a public area. They're in a secured back area behind the courtroom. But just, members of the public walking down the steps behind him, and he's barefoot in this image, which, who knows why that was the case. Maybe they didn't have jail-issued shoes or whatever, I don't know. But or maybe that was just the standard practice in those days, that the inmates wouldn't be wearing shoes. But yeah, just, old building. And, the story in Pickens County is that he was left in the law library to do some legal research because he was representing himself. And that's when he jumped from the window, moment of opportunity.
Can't imagine that happening today.
Mm-hmm.
And so where is that, what building is
This
that?
is in the Pickens County Courthouse in Aspen.
The one on the right?
Yeah, both of them.
Both of them?
Yes.
And this is before or after he's...
This would have been after he was recaptured in Pickens County.
And then, one more time, if you could explain, his facial expression, what do you see with the photo on the right?
Just, this photo here is just that iconic evil grin, as I've always referred to it. Just kind of that look of, I think I might get away with something here.
Cool. Keep that up for just a sec. I'm just going to shoot it off the screen as well.
And wasn't this photo, it was later featured in the Century, AP's Century, Photos of the Century or something like that?
May have been. I'm not familiar with that myself, yeah.
What do you think of this find, of having these photos come out so many years later?
It's just, it's always interesting when you come across these little pieces of history stuck away that haven't been seen for many years. And yeah, just a slice of history that I'm glad was preserved.
And who was the photographer on that photo?
Ross Dolan was his name. And we actually interviewed him for a follow-up story after the big safe cracking find. And he reached out to us and said, hey, I'd like to tell you my story of how that all came about. And he was just kind of trying to make a living in Aspen, piecing together odd jobs, including freelance photography. And that's how he ended up being the one who was, hey, go get some photos for us.
We actually talked to him on the phone yesterday.
Oh, did you? Yeah. Because he's up in the Northwest somewhere, isn't he?
Dakota, South Dakota.
South Dakota, that's right, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I never met him myself. But,
I can show you a picture of him.
Yeah, it seems like an interesting...
Because we didn't do the interview ourselves. We had the affiliate there do it, but that's what he looks like.
Oh, right.
And he was showing some photos.
Yeah, that's great.
So.
Yeah.
Let's see. So do you think this Ross Dolan, do you think he has a story to tell?
I would imagine so. Just being the one to capture that image, along with so many others in the courtroom and elsewhere. Yeah.
I mean, and especially now, nowadays everything's digital, everything's kind of archived on the internet, but if you're talking about film, it can, if it's not preserved correctly. Right,
yeah. I mean just even having these in the sleeves, I don't know that that's even the best way to keep something like that, but probably should.
But it's even more precious. I mean,
yeah.
Because nowadays I think we take for granted that you just, everything's digital and it's on a card and it's in a database and it's, on the internet and, wasn't that easy to preserve things back then.
Right.
I'm going to ask you to speculate a little bit. What kind of story do you think Ross Dolan would have to, on a day like that?
Well, there's a little bit of a backstory that I can tell you, but, just to have the the opportunity to capture that moment in time, I imagine he probably looks back at that and thinks, wow, I guess I was kind of lucky, you know, odd sort of way.
And then also, tell us about the paper you have in the front window.
That was just the story that we ran in, about the safe cracking and documenting that whole thing, and the discovery of these photos. And yeah, we just decided to put that as part of our window display.
Were a lot of people in town talking about it at the time?
Yeah, in town and all over. Right? It was one of those stories that kind of went viral by its own right and got picked up, you know, not only statewide but nationally and internationally. The British press is all over Ted Bundy stories too. They just dig that kind of stuff.
So were these photos never developed? Were these used as part of the original newspaper?
Yeah, if you go back, our bound volumes are over at the library, just across the alley over here, actually, and you'll find those photos from 1977, I guess, or 78, whenever that was. Yeah.
So these weren't like lost, never seen before. They were published.
Oh yeah, they had been published. Yeah, yeah. No,
it was
a rediscovery. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
this is the what's called a contact sheet. So when you would have the negative, you would basically take a picture of the negative to create a contact sheet to see what you have and what's in focus. And so you can see there's a whole series of him coming down the stairs there, and being led either to the jail or to the courtroom. I'm not sure.
Cool. Keep holding that. I'm going to zoom in now and get some tight shots. That looks really cool.
That does.
In the upper left-ish, one from the upper left is the one that's on your computer screen.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Actually, I think it's this one.
Oh, no, I mean that one from the left.
Oh, this one, yes. Yeah.
That's really cool. I'm going to come a little bit closer. Oops. Great. All right, so what do you have?
So this is the envelope with the negatives that we found in this safe.
And when you opened it?
When we opened it, we discovered the negatives that had the images from Ted Bundy's time in Pitkin County.
And thoughts on that?
Just the discovery of a little slice of history here that had been forgotten for many years, and but yeah, just great piece of history.